I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at my bank app, watching the number on the screen like it was a cruel joke. 1 second it was there, years of savings, the little safety net I'd been building since my son was born, and the next it was gone. Not withdrawn for a mortgage payment, not an emergency expense, not anything I had authorized. Just gone. It took me 30 seconds to connect the dots. 30 seconds to remember the conversation I'd had with my younger brother Liam 2 nights ago, where he casually mentioned how tight things were with him and his girlfriend and asked if I could spot him just a little. I had told him no, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't. Rent, groceries, my son's school supplies, that money wasn't extra. It was survival money. And now it was gone anyway. My name's Aaron, I'm 36, and for the past few years I've been raising my son Jacob on my own. His mom and I split when he was a toddler. Nothing dramatic, we just weren't good for each other, and she moved across the country. We've kept things civil, but day to day, it's just me and Jake. I work a decent but demanding job in IT, and we live in a small 2-bedroom rental that I've slowly been turning into a real home. A place that feels safe. A place I promised myself would never be touched by the chaos my brother seems to carry around like a storm cloud. Liam and I were close once. We grew up in a rough house. Dad left early, Mom worked double shifts, and a lot of the time it felt like we were raising each other. He was the goofy one, the dreamer, the kid who could talk himself out of detention and into someone else's snack stash. But somewhere along the way, that charm turned into manipulation. The past 5 years have been a carousel of short-lived jobs, bad girlfriends, and calls at 11 p.m. asking if I could cover his bills just until Friday. I had bailed him out more times than I could count, and every time, I told myself it would be the last. This time really was the last. I called him 3 times. No answer. By the 4th, my call went straight to voicemail. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt like it had a brick sitting on it. This wasn't just some casual borrowing. This was my entire savings. The emergency fund I'd been so proud of. The thing that let me sleep at night knowing that if something went wrong, I could still keep the lights on. Dad, Jake's small voice cut through my spiral. He was standing in the doorway in his superhero pajamas, holding his tablet. He's 10, but sometimes he looks at me like he's 40, like he knows exactly what I'm thinking before I say it. You look mad. I wanted to lie, to tell him everything was fine. But my voice cracked when I said, buddy, Uncle Liam took our money. He frowned, processing that for a second, and then asked, like, all of it? Yeah, I admitted, and saying it out loud made my stomach twist. Jake was quiet for a moment, then climbed up onto the chair across from me and put his elbows on the table like we were about to have a serious business meeting. Okay, he said finally, in this calm little voice that didn't match the storm in my chest. Then we take care of it. It almost made me laugh, the confidence in his tone, but before I could say anything, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam. Hey man, don't freak out. I'll pay you back. Just needed a fresh start. Heading out west with Maddie. Wish us luck. No apology. No explanation. No timeline for repayment. Just that. I didn't text him back. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there at the kitchen table until long after Jake went to bed, staring at that message and feeling a weird mix of rage, grief, and something heavier, betrayal. This wasn't just about money. This was my brother deciding that his impulsive road trip with his girlfriend mattered more than the roof over my kid's head. The next morning, I started making calls to the bank, to the police, to anyone who could tell me what recourse I had. The answer was the same every time, because Liam technically had joint access to that account from when we'd set it up years ago for shared family expenses. It wasn't considered theft. Legally, he had as much right to that money as I did. I can't even describe the helplessness that washed over me. It was like being mugged in broad daylight and then having the cops tell you, well, you were both standing on the sidewalk, so by that night, I felt hollow. But Jake wasn't done. I found him sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with his laptop open, typing furiously. What are you doing, kiddo? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced up, totally casual, and said, just taking care of it. I wanted to press him, but he had that look, the same stubborn look I get when I've decided something is non-negotiable. So I let it go. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. Loud, desperate. When I opened it, Liam was standing there, eyes red, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Aaron, man, we need to talk, he said, his voice cracking. And behind him, parked at the curb, was a car I didn't recognize, with someone sitting inside, waiting. That was the moment my stomach dropped, because whatever had just happened, it was big enough to make my brother cry. I didn't let him in right away. There was this beat of silence where we just stared at each other, and for a second, I think Liam thought I was going to slam the door in his face. And honestly, a part of me wanted to. But then I caught sight of the car behind him, some beat-up sedan with a girl in the passenger seat, head in her hands, clearly crying, and I stepped aside. 5 minutes, I said, my voice flat. He came inside like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair sticking out in every direction, and he smelled faintly like gasoline and fast food. That combination of desperation and road trip grime. "Where's Jake?" he asked, looking around. "In his room. Asleep." I crossed my arms. "Talk." Liam sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd been when I first realized what he'd done, and put his head in his hands. "I messed up, man. Like, big time." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He finally looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "The money's gone." I almost laughed. "Gone?" Like it hadn't been gone the second he hit that transfer button. "You mean you spent it?" I said, voice cold. "No. Well, yes, some of it, but most of it's, I don't even know. Maddie convinced me to put it into this investment thing one of her friends was doing. Said it was a guaranteed double. It was supposed to be safe, but it was a scam. All of it. They took everything and disappeared." I leaned back in my chair, feeling my jaw clench. "So let me get this straight. You stole from me, drained every cent I had, took off with your girlfriend, and then handed the money to a stranger because she said it was a good idea?" He winced at the word stole, but didn't argue. "You don't understand, Aaron," he said, voice rising. "We were going to make it right. This was supposed to be the thing that fixed everything. I was going to pay you back double. I was going to finally get out of this hole. I slammed my hand on the table, hard enough that the sound echoed through the apartment. "You don't get to talk about fixing things when you're the one who broke them in the first place." That shut him up for a moment. We sat there in silence, the kind that feels too loud. I could hear the faint hum of Jake's white noise machine down the hall. My chest was tight, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then he said it, the thing that made something in me snap. "You always act like you're better than me. Like just because you've got the kid and the steady job, you're the responsible one. But you wouldn't even help me when I asked. What kind of brother does that?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "What kind of brother steals from the only family that still talks to him?" He flinched, but pressed on. "You think you've got it so hard? Try living without anyone in your corner. Mom and Dad always took your side. You always had the grades, the job, the girl. Stop acting like this is about childhood jealousy." I snapped. "You're 32 years old, Liam. You made this choice. You don't get to play the victim." He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "I came here because I thought maybe we could work this out. But clearly, you just want to sit there on your high horse. Fine. Don't help me. See where that gets you when things really hit the fan." And then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard that a picture frame rattled on the wall. I stood there for a minute, breathing hard, before I realized Jake was awake. He was standing in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, looking small and worried. "Hey," I said softly, trying to calm myself down. "It's okay, buddy. Go back to bed." He didn't move. "Did he yell at you?" "Yeah," I admitted. "But it's okay. He's gone now." Jake hesitated, then said, "He's just mad because he got caught. Don't feel bad." And then he padded back to his room, leaving me standing there in the kitchen feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam's face, angry, desperate, and just a little bit scared. And somewhere under the anger, I felt that tiny pang of guilt I always get when I stand up to him. It's like muscle memory from when we were kids, like I'm breaking some unwritten rule about keeping the peace. The next day, I found out Liam had gone to our mother's house. I know because she called me. "Aaron," she said, voice clipped. "Your brother just came by, crying his eyes out. He told me what happened. How could you let him get into a situation like this?" I closed my eyes and counted to 3 before answering. "Mom, he took my savings. He didn't ask, he didn't warn me. And now he's trying to make me feel bad about not helping him more." "He's your brother," she said sharply. "Family is supposed to help family. Family doesn't bankrupt each other." There was a pause, then a sigh. "You've always been so hard on him." I hung up, not rudely, but firmly. Because if I didn't, I was going to say something I couldn't take back. That night, Jake came into the living room with that same mysterious look on his face. "It's almost done," he said. "What's almost done?" I asked. He grinned. "You'll see." Before I could ask more, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Liam. This one just said, "You better fix this before I do." That sent a chill down my spine. Because Liam was reckless, and when he said stuff like that, he usually meant it. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. About him trying to scare me into doing what he wanted. The next morning, someone knocked on my door again. Not a desperate, late-night knock this time, but a deliberate, three-beat rhythm. When I opened it, it wasn't Liam. It was Maddie, and she looked worse than he had. Her mascara was streaked down her cheeks, and her hands were shaking as she held out a crumpled envelope. "I can't do this anymore," she said. That's when I knew things were about to get a whole lot messier. Maddie's hands were trembling so badly I had to take the envelope from her before it slipped. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at the ground like a kid caught sneaking out after curfew. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated for a moment. She wasn't my favorite person in the world, but she wasn't the one who hit the transfer button. Finally, I stepped aside and let her in. She sank into the chair at the kitchen table, looking like she hadn't eaten in days. I opened the envelope. Inside were a handful of crumpled receipts, a gas station coffee-stained napkin with numbers scribbled on it, and a printed-out email. The email was from some generic-looking crypto investment platform, thanking them for their deposit and confirming their account had been successfully opened. I felt my stomach twist. "How much did you put in?" I asked. Maddie flinched. "All of it." I dropped the papers on the table and ran my hand through my hair, trying to process. "All of it? As in everything," she said quickly, almost defensively. "Look, it wasn't just me. Liam said it was the fastest way to get the money back to you. He said you'd be proud if we doubled it and paid you back right away." My laugh came out sharp and ugly. "Proud? You think I'd be proud of you two gambling away every cent I had?" "It wasn't gambling," she shot back, her eyes finally flashing. "It was a guaranteed return. At least that's what we thought. Until..." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. "Until what?" I demanded. She looked up at me then, tears streaming down her face. "Until Liam pulled the rest of the money out and wired it straight to his own account. He said he didn't trust leaving it there after what happened to the first chunk. I thought he was going to give it back to you. But then he bought a car. And some stuff for us. Clothes, hotel rooms. We were in California for 2 days, Aaron. 2 days before he blew through most of it." I stared at her, my mind going blank for a moment. "So let me get this straight. He didn't just lose the money. He spent what was left." Maddie nodded miserably. I gripped the back of the chair so hard my knuckles went white. There was this ringing in my ears, like the world had just gone quiet except for the sound of my own pulse. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from Liam. "I need more. If you don't send something by tonight, I'll come get it myself." I turned the phone around and showed Maddie. "This is what he's doing while you're here crying." She bit her lip. "He doesn't know I came here. He thinks I'm at the motel." That was when I felt it. That snapping sensation inside, like the last frayed thread finally giving way. Up until now, I'd been angry, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I was still treating this like a fight we'd recover from. Brothers fight, right? Brothers make stupid choices, and sometimes they even betray you, but there's always that chance to patch things up later. Not anymore. This wasn't just him making a mistake. This was him burning every bridge I had left to offer. Jake must have heard voices because he wandered out of his room, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from me to Maddie. Maddie wiped her face quickly. "Nothing, sweetie. Just talking." But Jake's too smart for that. He looked at me, waiting. I crouched down so we were eye level. "Uncle Liam spent all the money," I said quietly. "And now he's asking for more." Jake's expression hardened in a way I didn't expect from a 10-year-old. "Then he's not allowed here anymore." I almost smiled at how simple he made it sound. "It's not that easy," I said softly. He tilted his head. "Yes, it is." Then he looked at Maddie. "Are you on his side?" She froze for a second, then shook her head. "Not anymore." Jake nodded once, like that settled something in his mind, and disappeared back into his room. I sat down across from Maddie again. "You need to leave him," I said bluntly. Her eyes widened. "What? You came here because you're scared?" I said. You know this is out of control. He's going to keep digging until there's nothing left for anyone. And if you stay, he's going to drag you down with him. I can't just leave him, she whispered. Then don't, I said, standing. But don't come here again if you're going to keep helping him. I can't protect you from what's coming. She stared at me for a long moment, then stood too. You really think he'd hurt you? I didn't answer. She left without another word, and I stood in the doorway watching her get into that rusted sedan and drive off. For the rest of the night, I paced. My mind kept replaying every memory I had of Liam. The time he lied to get me grounded so he could go to a party. The time he borrowed my car and came back with a dent. The time he charmed my last $50 out of me with some sob story about overdue rent. And all those times, I forgave him. But this time was different. This time there was no forgiveness coming. Just before midnight, I heard footsteps outside my apartment door. Slow, heavy, deliberate. When I looked through the peephole, Liam was standing there. And this time, he wasn't crying. He was smiling. And that was somehow so much worse. I stood there with my eye pressed to the peephole for what felt like a full minute, just watching him. Liam didn't knock this time. He just stood there grinning, hands shoved in the pockets of his hoodie, rocking back and forth on his heels like he had all the time in the world. I didn't open the door. Something about that smile told me that if I let him in, I'd regret it. Eventually, he leaned forward, close enough that I could see the shadows under his eyes, and said just loud enough for me to hear through the door, "You can't ignore me forever, Aaron. This isn't over." Then he turned and walked away, whistling. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat on the couch in the dark, every muscle tense, listening for footsteps, half convinced he'd come back and try the door. I kept replaying Maddie's words in my head. He pulled the rest of the money out and wired it to himself. And that message he sent me threatening to come get it himself. What did that even mean? Was he talking about more money? Something worse? By morning, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I called in sick to work, which I never do, just so I could stay home and keep an eye on things. Around noon, I caught myself sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at my online banking page again, like maybe the money would magically reappear. Of course, it didn't. Then the call came. "Mom." "Aaron," she said before I could even say hello, "your brother just stopped by? He's in bad shape. He said you kicked him out and refused to help. What's wrong with you?" I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. What's wrong with me? "Mom, he stole my entire savings. That's what's wrong with me." "You make it sound so dramatic," she snapped. "He just borrowed it." "Borrowing involves asking first," I said flatly. "You've always been so cold with him," she said, her tone shifting into that disappointed mother voice that still makes me feel 10 years old. "You know he's had a harder life than you." I almost dropped the phone. "A harder life? Mom, we grew up in the same house. You had school, you had sports, you had friends," she shot back. "He had none of that." I just sat there, stunned. And whose fault is that? Because it wasn't mine. But she wasn't listening. "I'm telling you, Aaron, you need to make this right. He's family. You can't just turn your back on him." That was the moment it really hit me. Mom wasn't going to take my side. She never had, not really. Even as kids, whenever there was trouble, she'd sigh and tell me to be the bigger person. And I always was. I was the one who gave up the last slice of pizza, the one who took the blame when something got broken, the one who stayed up late helping him with homework he didn't want to do. And now? Now she wanted me to fix the mess he made of my life. "I can't talk about this anymore," I said finally, and hung up before she could say anything else. I must have sat there for another hour just staring at the wall. My chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a weight right on top of me. For the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel angry. I just felt empty. Around 3 o'clock, Jake came into the kitchen and slid a plate of crackers and cheese toward me. "You forgot to eat lunch," he said simply. I blinked at the plate, realizing I hadn't eaten breakfast either. "Thanks, buddy," I said softly, and forced myself to take a bite. After that, I made myself get up and shower, even though it felt pointless. Then I went into my bedroom and pulled out the fireproof box I keep under my bed, the one with all my important documents, and laid everything out on the bed: birth certificate, insurance papers, lease agreement, the file with my life insurance policy. I sat there staring at it all, heart pounding. If Liam was willing to drain my account and then show up at my door smiling, what would stop him from trying to use my name to open something else? Get credit cards in my name? Take out loans? The thought made me cold all over. I spent the next 2 hours freezing every account I could, changing passwords, adding extra security measures. By the time I was done, my hands were shaking from the adrenaline. But for the first time in days, I felt like I'd taken back a little bit of control. That night, I packed a go bag for Jake and me. Just essentials, a change of clothes, toothbrushes, some cash. I didn't know if I'd need it, but it made me feel better knowing I had it. Around midnight, I was sitting on the couch with the lights off when I heard it, the sound of something hitting my window. Not hard enough to break it, but enough to make me freeze. I crept over and peeked through the blinds. There was Liam, standing in the yard, tossing little pebbles at the window like some twisted version of a rom-com character. When he saw me looking, he waved and grinned. "Open up, man," he called softly, just loud enough for me to hear. "We need to talk." I didn't move. After a minute, his smile faded. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked away into the night. I didn't sleep. Again. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for the next knock at the door. I started researching lawyers. If I couldn't press criminal charges, maybe there was something else I could do. Some kind of civil action, anything that would put a legal barrier between us. It felt like rock bottom, sitting there with my laptop, Jake at school, my apartment too quiet. But somewhere deep down, a small part of me was already planning my next move. I wasn't going to let Liam keep running my life. And I definitely wasn't going to let him teach Jake that this was how family was supposed to work. Late that afternoon, Maddie texted me. Just 3 words. "He's getting worse." And then, "Be careful tonight." When I read Maddie's text, I felt something shift inside me. Up until now, I'd been reacting to everything, putting out fires, trying to survive one disaster after another. But this was different. This was a warning. And if Maddie was scared enough to warn me, that meant something was about to break. I put my phone down, sat back in the chair, and just breathed for a minute. Then I started making calls. The first one was to a lawyer. I explained everything. The joint account, the drained savings, the threatening texts. She didn't promise miracles, but she gave me something I hadn't had in weeks, a plan. Step 1 was to formally remove Liam's name from anything with my signature on it. Step 2 was to file a cease and desist letter to put him on notice that any further contact or harassment could be grounds for legal action. It wasn't revenge yet, but it was the first brick in a wall I was building between my family and his chaos. The next call I made was to my bank. I set up a completely new account under just my name, moved what little money I had left there, and asked them to flag any attempts at joint access or withdrawals as fraudulent. I even arranged for new debit cards to be sent to my office instead of my home, just in case Liam tried to intercept them. When Jake got home from school, I sat him down at the table. "Buddy, we're going to be okay," I said. He looked at me skeptically, like he could see right through me. "Did something happen?" "Nothing bad," I said carefully. "But we're going to make some changes. We're going to keep our stuff safe." He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "Good, because I finished what I was working on." I raised an eyebrow. "You still haven't told me what that is." He grinned. "You'll see." Then he ran off to his room, leaving me sitting there shaking my head. That night, I started feeling a little lighter. It wasn't like my savings had magically reappeared. They hadn't. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't just sitting around waiting for the next blow. I was doing something. The next morning, I got a call from Maddie. "I left him," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "I packed my stuff while he was out and got a bus ticket. I'm staying with my cousin for a while." "That's good, Maddie," I said, and I meant it. "You should know, he's furious. Like, scarier than I've ever seen him. He was throwing things when he came back and realized I was gone. If I were you, I'd keep the doors locked." I swallowed hard. "I always do." She was quiet for a second, then said, "He's not just angry about the money anymore. He thinks you turned me against him." I almost laughed at that. I didn't have to. He did that all by himself. Still, her words stayed with me after we hung up. Because I knew Liam. When he lost control, he lashed out. And if Maddie wasn't there to absorb it, that meant I was his next target. But this time, I wasn't going to be an easy one. Over the next week, I threw myself into work, picking up overtime where I could. Every extra dollar went into the new account. It wasn't much, but watching that number tick upward felt like taking back a little piece of what Liam had taken from me. I also started talking to a financial advisor my lawyer recommended. She walked me through setting up a trust account for Jake's future, one that Liam wouldn't be able to touch even if he tried. It felt good, taking that step, like I was building something solid again after everything had been ripped away. One night, a few days later, I found Jake in the living room with his laptop open, a spreadsheet on the screen. "What's that?" I asked, curious. He grinned. "Remember how you said Uncle Liam took the money? Well, I figured out where some of it went." I blinked. "You what?" "I used the login info you always keep on the fridge," he said proudly. "I tracked the transactions. I even saved screenshots." I sat down next to him, staring at the screen. He'd built a neat little timeline of every withdrawal, every transfer, even the payment for that car Maddie mentioned. "This is impressive," I said honestly. He shrugged. "I just wanted to help. And now you can prove it was him, right?" My chest tightened. "Yeah, buddy. Now I can prove it was him." That night, I printed every single screenshot and put them in a folder labeled Evidence. I didn't know yet exactly how I'd use it, but just holding that folder felt like holding a weapon. The turning point came a few days later. Liam texted me again, another demand for money, this one nastier than the last. Instead of panicking, I took a deep breath, snapped a photo of the folder, and sent it to him with one line. "Try me again and see what happens." His reply came fast. "You wouldn't dare." I didn't answer. For the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. A few days later, my lawyer called to say the cease and desist had been served. If Liam tried to contact me again, it could be considered harassment. That night, I actually slept. Not all the way through. I still woke up a few times out of habit, listening for footsteps. But when morning came, I didn't feel crushed under that weight anymore. Jake noticed, too. "You're smiling again," he said at breakfast, almost surprised. "Yeah," I said, ruffling his hair. "Feels good, doesn't it?" And for the first time since this whole mess started, it really did. But just as I started to feel like maybe we'd weathered the worst of it, the next storm came rolling in. It was a Thursday night when I got home from work and found a folded piece of paper tucked into my doorframe. No envelope. No signature. Inside, in Liam's messy handwriting, were 6 words that made my stomach drop. "You think you've won? Watch me." I must have read those 6 words 100 times, my fingers gripping the paper until it crumpled. "You think you've won? Watch me." It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. I stood there in the doorway, the evening air cold against the back of my neck, and felt that familiar mix of anger and fear start to rise. Only this time, the fear didn't win. I flattened the note, took a photo for my records, and tucked it into the evidence folder. Then I locked the door, sat down at the table, and started writing. Not a letter, a list. Every single thing Liam had done, in order. The drained account, the threatening texts, the unannounced visits, the note I just found. The more I wrote, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a family spat anymore. This was harassment. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told her about the note. She didn't hesitate. "This is exactly why we filed that cease and desist," she said. "Document it all. If he escalates again, we can take this to court and request a protective order." A protective order. I let those words roll around in my head all day. The thought of having a legal document that could actually keep Liam away from us, that was power. That evening, after Jake went to bed, I sat in the living room with my laptop and started digging deeper into the transactions Jake had found. Most of them were small enough to seem unremarkable: hotel charges, gas stations, restaurants. But one stood out: a $4,200 transfer to a used car dealership 3 counties over. I clicked through their website and, after a little searching, found the exact car Liam had bought: a black 2011 Dodge Challenger with a price tag that made my stomach turn. But then I noticed something interesting. The dealership had a policy listed on their site. If a buyer failed to make their payment within 30 days of purchase, the car could be repossessed. An idea started forming in my head. The next day, I called the dealership pretending to be a concerned relative who wanted to make sure the vehicle was properly insured. They wouldn't give me much, privacy laws and all that. But they did confirm something crucial. The car wasn't fully paid off. Liam had financed part of it, which meant if he missed a single payment, the dealership could take it back. I hung up with a slow smile spreading across my face. That night, Maddie called me again. Her voice sounded steadier than before. "I think you should know," she said. "He's been bragging about that car to everyone. Showing off, driving like a maniac. I heard he already got a warning from the cops for peeling out in a parking lot." "Perfect. Thanks, Maddie," I said. "And hey, good for you. getting out when you did. I should have done it sooner, she said with a bitter laugh. He's not going to stop until someone makes him. Then maybe it's time someone did, I said quietly. Over the next few days, I worked with my lawyer to prepare everything we'd need to take this to the next level. Between the screenshots Jake had collected, the threatening texts, and now the note, we had a solid case to present to a judge. I also started talking to the financial advisor again, this time about locking down my credit entirely. We put a freeze on my reports with all 3 major bureaus, so Liam couldn't open anything in my name. Piece by piece, I was taking back control. Jake noticed the change. "You don't look scared anymore," he said one night as we were eating dinner. "I'm not," I told him honestly. "Not because what your uncle did wasn't wrong. It was, but because now we know how to deal with it." Jake grinned. "Good. Because I made a backup of all the screenshots on a flash drive, just in case." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're 10 years old, and you think like a detective." He shrugged. "Someone has to." The turning point came a few days later when I got a call from the dealership again. "Sir," the man on the phone said carefully, "we're calling as a courtesy to let you know the payment on the Challenger is now officially overdue." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there in silence for a moment. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my camera roll to the photo of Liam's smiling face through the peephole. I stared at it for a long time, then at the folder full of evidence on my kitchen table. For the first time since this whole mess began, I wasn't dreading the next knock at my door. I was waiting for it. And when it came, because I knew it would, I planned to be ready. That night, I pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out what I could only describe as a strategy. If Liam wanted to escalate, I was going to escalate smarter. The car was leverage. The evidence folder was leverage. And now I had Maddie, who seemed more than willing to testify about where the money went if it came to that. I even started quietly talking to a few people I knew in town. A friend who worked at the police department, a neighbor who had cameras facing the parking lot, just to make sure if things went south, I'd have witnesses. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case. Late one evening, I found Jake sitting cross-legged on the couch with his laptop again. "You know," he said without looking up, "if Uncle Liam keeps driving that car like he is, he's going to get it impounded sooner or later." I smiled faintly. "Maybe sooner than he thinks." Jake looked up at me then, his grin mischievous. "Good. Because this time, we weren't just surviving. We were preparing. And when the day finally came that Liam tried to push us one step too far, I planned to push back so hard he'd never see it coming." The knock came 3 nights later. I'd been expecting it, but it still made my pulse spike. This time, though, I wasn't caught off guard. I had the folder of evidence laid out on the table, my phone in one hand, and the number for the non-emergency police line already queued up, just in case. When I opened the door, Liam was standing there, looking ragged. The smug grin was gone, replaced by a simmering anger that made his jaw twitch. He didn't even wait for an invitation. He pushed his way inside like he owned the place. "You've been talking to Maddie," he said, his voice low and tight. I closed the door behind him slowly. "She came to me. Probably because you scared her off." "She had no right," he snapped. "None of this would have happened if you'd just helped me when I asked." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Helped you? Liam, you stole from me. You didn't ask. You didn't give me a choice. You think you're better than me," he said, stepping closer, his finger jabbing at my chest. "Always have. But you're not. You're just lucky. And now you're sitting on your high horse acting like I ruined your life." "You didn't ruin my life," I said evenly. "You just made me realize who you really are." That seemed to throw him for a second. He blinked, taken aback. "You think you can just cut me off? I'm your brother." "You were my brother," I said quietly, "until you made it impossible to trust you." He sneered. "What are you going to do, call the cops? Tell them your little sob story?" I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I walked over to the table, picked up the folder, and handed it to him. "Go ahead. Look." He opened it, flipping through the printed screenshots, the note he left me, the record of every transfer and hotel stay. His face went from defiant to pale as the weight of it sank in. "You've been keeping track of everything," he muttered. "Yes," I said simply. "And my lawyer has a copy too. So does my financial advisor. So if anything happens to me or to Jake, this doesn't just disappear. You don't get to scare me into silence." He dropped the folder on the table and took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "You think this scares me?" "No," I said, my voice calm and deliberate. I think it scares you that for once, you don't have the upper hand. You can't talk your way out of this, Liam. You can't guilt me or Mom into bailing you out. I've locked every account, froze my credit, and I've got every piece of proof I need to take you to court if you so much as breathe in my direction again. He opened his mouth, probably to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I reached for my phone and pressed call. Non-emergency police line, the operator said. Yes, I said, keeping my eyes locked on Liam. I need to report a violation of a cease and desist letter. The subject is here at my apartment right now. That got him. His face went from angry to panicked in an instant. You're calling the cops on me? He hissed. Yes, I said, as calmly as if I'd just confirmed a pizza order. He backed toward the door. Fine, I'm leaving. But this isn't over. Oh, it's over, I said, finally letting the steel into my voice. Because if you ever come near me or Jake again, the next call I make won't be the non-emergency line. He stood there for a second, breathing hard, then turned and stormed out. I watched from the window as he got into the Challenger, revved the engine, and tore out of the parking lot so fast his tires squealed. An hour later, I got a call from Maddie. You'll never guess what just happened, she said. Try me, I replied, still feeling the adrenaline humming in my veins. He just got pulled over. My cousin's friend saw it, said they were writing him up for reckless driving. And if he doesn't pay the fine, she trailed off, they'll report it to the dealership. I finished for her, which meant that shiny black Challenger, the one he'd been showing off to everyone, was officially on borrowed time. I thanked Maddie, hung up, and went back to the table where the folder still lay open. For the first time since all of this began, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was setting the tone. Jake came out of his room, rubbing his eyes. Did he leave? Yeah, I said softly. And he's not coming back. Jake studied my face for a second, then nodded. Good. He didn't need to know the details, not yet. But when he went back to bed, I sat there in the quiet apartment, the evidence folder spread out before me, and started thinking about my next move. Because this wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about making sure Liam finally faced the consequences he'd been running from his whole life. And I had just enough leverage to make sure he did. The fallout started faster than I expected. 3 days after that confrontation, I got a call from the dealership. The manager's voice was polite, almost cheerful. Mr. Collins, I just wanted to thank you for the information you provided the other day about your brother's situation. We've had no luck reaching him for the past 2 weeks, and after his missed payment and the police report about reckless driving, we've decided to initiate repossession. I tried to keep my voice neutral. Understood. I just wanted to make sure you knew where to find the car if you needed it. Oh, we know, he said lightly. The tow truck will be there by morning. That night, I didn't sleep much, not out of fear this time, but because I kept imagining the look on Liam's face when he woke up to find that Challenger gone. The next morning, I heard the telltale sound of a tow truck's winch outside. I stepped onto the balcony just in time to see the car being hooked and pulled away. Liam wasn't there, thank God, but I could almost picture the storm that would hit when he found out. Sure enough, he showed up that afternoon, pounding on my door so hard I thought it might break. You did this, he shouted. I didn't open the door. I just called through it, my voice calm. You violated a legal order when you came here last time. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police again, and this time, they'll take you in. There was a long silence on the other side of the door, then the sound of him kicking it once in frustration before storming off. That night, Maddie texted me. He's staying with some guy from work now. He's broke. Everyone knows what happened. And just like that, the calls from my mom stopped too. I guess even she couldn't spin this one into just borrowing. Over the next week, everything started to settle. My lawyer filed the final paperwork, and we had a court date set for the following month to formally dissolve any joint accounts Liam and I had ever shared. It felt like closing a chapter that had been open way too long. But the real moment of closure came a week later, on a quiet Saturday morning. I was making pancakes for Jake when there was a knock at the door, a soft one this time. When I opened it, Liam was standing there. No yelling, no smug grin. Just standing with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking like someone deflated him. I just came to say, he hesitated, glancing past me like he wasn't sure if I'd even let him get the words out. I'm sorry. I leaned against the doorframe, spatula still in my hand. Sorry for taking the money? Or sorry you got caught? His shoulders slumped. Both. I let the silence stretch for a moment before I said, Liam, You didn't just take money. You took away the one thing I promised Jake I'd never lose, security. You scared him. You scared me. And you made me choose between being your brother and being his dad. He swallowed hard, but he didn't argue. I'm not saying this to punish you, I went on. I'm saying it because you need to hear it. You burned the bridge between us. And if you want to build it back someday, it's going to take a lot more than showing up here saying you're sorry. He nodded once, then turned and walked away without another word. When I closed the door, Jake peeked out from the kitchen. Was that him? Yeah, I said, turning back to the stove. He said he was sorry. Jake considered that, then asked, "Are we still safe?" I knelt down so we were eye level. Safer than we've ever been, I said. And it was true. The pancakes that morning tasted better than any breakfast I could remember. Maybe because for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. That afternoon, I took Jake to the park. The sun was out, kids were laughing, and for once, I let myself laugh too. On the way back, Jake looked up at me and said, "You know, Dad, we make a pretty good team." I smiled. "Yeah, buddy, we really do." When we got home, I opened the folder one last time, looked at all the papers, and then tucked it into the back of the closet. Not because I needed it anymore, but because it was a reminder. A reminder that I could be pushed to rock bottom and still climb back up. A reminder that I wasn't just someone who endured. I was someone who fought back. And as I stood there, watching Jake sit on the floor building his Lego castle, I realized something. Liam might have taken my savings, but in the end, he'd given me something bigger. The clarity to finally stop being the one who always cleaned up his messes. The strength to put my son first. And the power to draw a line and say, no more. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't scare me. It felt like ours again. And this time, I intended to protect it, no matter what it took.